Hi card makers, welcome to class with Club Scrap. Today we're going to be learning how to make 16 really beautiful cards using our Hello Sunshine collection. And they also come with two really cool folios. These are going to hold your A2 cards. These are packed full of 4 cards each along with their envelopes. Wonderful for happy hostess gifts, like when we can go and places and give them to our hostesses, and a series of cards that fit into A6 envelopes. These are really fun, simple to put together, and just also very cheerful. And then we have some pockets full of sunshine. So we've got a 5x7 base card, and each one has its own pocket, as well as a cute little tag that could double down the road as a bookmark, perhaps. So if get your kit and trimmer, your accordion pocket file, and your instructions ready, and let's get started. All right, let's set aside the 4 beautiful ribbons we've included with this kit. I especially love this daisy edged chiffon, and we've got some charms, some tags, and some laser cut daisies as well. Really sweet embellishments and nice and flat for greeting card making too. So let's get our paper into the proper order for our trimming enjoyment. So I'm going to start with the papers we'll trim to make our cards. That's going to be a light yellow piece. So that'll be our first paper that we will cut. And then grab a white plain. Even the white is really beautiful. And a black plain. This is a nice 80-pound cover weight. Then a dark yellow. Make sure you don't grab the orange, but you grab the dark yellow shade. One more black. One more white. An orange. And then a print. So be sure to flip the print over to the plain side so that we can flip it all over in a minute. Then grab the other orange. One more print. A light yellow and a dark yellow, followed by the 2 sheets of cut aparts, which we will then separate and file as well. Flip everything over, and that light yellow should be right back on top, and we will get to our trimming. Now I'm looking at page 2 of my instructions, and here is the first diagram. We will trim 2 papers the same exact way, and notice that our grain direction needs to be dipping top to bottom. So we'll start out with that, and I'll take my yellow, get it dipping easily top to bottom by holding the paper on its edge. Well, that really wants to go that way. So dipping top to bottom. We will put all this in the trimmer, both sheets at the same time, the light yellow and white, and we'll trim at 11 1/4. Then 10 1/2, 9 1/2, 8 1/2, and 4 1/4. Take this 4 1/4 and trim horizontally at 11, and then set aside this long piece to be scored. These other narrow strips can be put in pocket A. Let's do the same thing with this next 4 1/4 by 12. We'll trim horizontally at 11. Set these aside for scoring and put the other strips in pocket A. Now we have all these really narrow strips. Grab the top 2. These are 1 by 12 and put them in pocket D. That's going to house the contents of everything we need to make our folios. Then you have another 1 by 12 strip. Let's trim this one horizontally at 11 1/2. And 5 3/4. Notice that I'm going to do the edge, the bottom edge of my inch marking line, and lining my paper up with that so I can see better. All right, that gives me 4 little strips for pocket B. Then I'm going to take one more pair of this 3/4 by 12, put that in pocket D, and then this 3/4 by 12 I'm going to trim horizontally again at 11 1/2 and 5 3/4. These 4 little strips go in pocket B, and they'll eventually nest with the 1 by 1 inch pieces we put in there earlier. So do you see how that comes together? So again, all of that goes in pocket B. Now we're going to make the pieces that grow up to become our folio, and we will once again put them in the trimmer so that they dip easily top to bottom. Now these folios fold in both directions, but I just went with the longest fold for the grain direction here. So we're going to do the black and the dark yellow at the same exact time. Our first cut will be at 11 3/4. And then 8 1/2. Rotate and trim at 11. Set these pieces aside to be scored. And these pieces are not used. I'm going to set them aside because I think I sort of did use them, but of course it's all optional for you. Then we have a 3 1/2 by 12 inch strip. We'll trim horizontally at 11 1/2 and 5 3/4. These rectangles go in pocket C. Now take one black and one white. So again, dipping easily top to bottom. So we have a little pattern going here this time around. Really flexible that way. And we do have a couple of scraps that are accumulating here. These really narrow little pieces. And then from earlier, just these itty bitty little rectangles. We can get rid of those. Okay, black and white we're trimming at the exact same time, and our first cut will be at 6 1/4. Rotate and cut at 9. This will be scored for later, so set that aside. And then pick up the narrow strip here. We'll cut horizontally at 6 3 1/4. Both of these pieces cleverly nest, so we're going to interchange them, and notice the smaller square will fit onto the larger square. So that kind of swaps out like that. Isn't that fun? All of that goes in pocket A. We're making 8 A cards. There's going to be a lot of stuff in that pocket. Okay, now this next larger piece, we're going to place this in the trimmer horizontally and cut at 8 4. This piece goes in pocket B. Then grab the next pair, the black and the white, cut horizontally at 5 1/4. That will go in pocket A. Those are nice mats. And then this final piece we'll trim horizontally at 5 1/2. That will go in pocket D. It's going to be for the front of the folios. And we have a few small scraps to dispose of. Next we'll take one orange, make sure it dips easy top to bottom, and one print. That's pretty good, I like that. Dipping top to bottom. Very similar trimming diagram, just a small change, so you gotta watch carefully. We're cutting this again at 6 1/4. Rotate and trim at 9. Set these larger pieces aside to be scored, and then we're going to cut this horizontally again at 6 3 1/4. Guess what happens with these guys? They nest with each other. How clever is that, right? Pocket A, here we go. Pick up the next pieces, and we'll cut horizontally at 11 3/4, 8 4. This, put in pocket B. The next two pieces, one of each, trim horizontally at 5 1/4. That's pocket A. And then the next pair horizontally also at 5 1/4. That's going to be for the folio in pocket D, and just a few little end cuts here. Next, take another orange, making sure it dips easily this time, left to right. So check your grain. And then same with the print, left to right dipping. Very good. This is going to make our pockets for the 5x7 card. And first we'll make the card base. So 7 inches. Rotate and cut at 10. This gets scored. And we'll trim the 2x7 horizontally, both of them at the same time at 5 1/4. Believe it or not, both of these sets go in pocket A. And then you've got what will become the pockets. We're just going to take these 4 pieces and trim them horizontally at 6 and set these aside to be scored. Last 2 pieces, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to have this dip easily left to right. This is a nice heavy stock. I love it. Okay, we're going to trim at 8 1/2. Then rotate this piece so it's horizontal and cut at 11 and 5.5. Set aside the 5.5 by 8.5 to be scored. Then there's going to be a 1 by 8.5 inch piece. We're going to trim that horizontally at 5.25. And once again, I'll go to that lower measuring line, pocket A, and these little guys are a scrap. Then you have a 3.5 by 12 remaining. Trim that horizontally at 6. These are going to be the pocket inserts for our card set C. And here we've arrived at our cut-aparts. We're going to take the one that has the words "You Are Brave" on it and make sure that's in the upper right corner, and follow our pre-marked registration lines to trim these apart. And I will say, the lines are a little bit darker this month, and I'm not exactly sure why. We didn't really change anything in the artwork files, but I've asked Jacqueline to lighten those up a little bit for next month, so we'll give that a try and see what happens. Okay, we're going to cut. Our first trim will be at 9.5. And then slide to 7.5 and 5.5. Now rotate, and we're going to cut at 9, 6, and 3, I'm guessing. Yes. Just kind of default to wherever those lines are. Trying to get right on them. All right, these 4 tags place in pocket C. Now we have the Thinking of You strip, and I'm guessing that'll be 9, 6, and 3 as well. Yes, 9, 6, 3. And all of these go in pocket A. The next strip, guess what? 9, 6, and 3. All of this goes in pocket A. Woohoo! A. I told you A was going to be really full. Okay, then make sure your little scrap is on the right and trim at 11 and 8.25, 5.5. I'm just going to trim a little bit of that black off here, that registration mark. That's one thing I love about this trimmer, is you can do that. 5.5 and 2.75 for the final. Guess where these all go? A. And I don't think I used this, so I'm going to put that in my scrap pile. Finally, our last cut apart. Make sure you have the daisies on the right here. And we'll start out at 10.5. 8.75. Be careful here. Slide all the way down so that you don't cut through your daisies. And just when you thought you had this all figured out, I throw that at you. This is 4.75. Rotate, and guess what? I think it's going to be a 9 and a 6. I love math. Said no one ever. And 3. Okay, so all of these go into pocket B, all the same size pieces. Then we have this strip to deal with. So we'll first probably cut it, I think it's going to be 8. Yeah, 8. And then 4. Yes. Rotate, separate these two at 2. And then both of these go in pocket B for once. Same with the other pairing, pocket B at 2 inches. And then we have our little daisies. Now I'm just going to do a quick separation here of them, and you can go back later and detail fussy cut these. And it's not that big. You don't have to be super accurate with your fussy cut. Obviously more accurate than this. Okay, the half daisies, put those in pocket A, and the full go in pocket one of them goes in C and one goes in D. I was not an equal opportunity user of the daisies. Okay, then we'll place this in horizontally and cut at 10 and 5. These both go in pocket A, as I said, and a scrap. And again here I'm going to put this orange daisy on the right and cut at 9.5 and 7.75, 6, and I'm going to take a little bit of that registration mark off of this, just a nice and neat and up cut. Look at that. It takes off just this itty bitty sliver. Okay, and this at 3. These are used in the covers of the folios, so put that in pocket D. The Hello Sunshines, A, and this is another scrap. That's all the trimming we need to do with this, so I'm going to grab my score pal. I'm taking my pile of stuff and just sort of getting things into piles by size so I can differentiate what's going on. I try to keep the smaller stuff in the front, just so that when I say look for something that you'll be able to find it. So there's a whole bunch of these long, narrow, these are 4 1/4 by 11s. I'm going to take 2 at a time and push firmly at 5 1/2. Maybe make 2 passes just to make sure you get a nice score. These are going to be card bases for set A, and again scoring horizontally at 5 1/2. The other set A cards are going to be 5 1/2 by 8 1/2. So make sure that's the size you have. I have them in light yellow and dark yellow, and I'll score at 4 1/4. So the 4 of them are vertical and 4 of them are horizontal. Okay, those are all used in set A. So if you want, you can put those in the pocket or you can just set them aside. Okay, then I have some smaller ones. These are 6 1/4 by 9. We'll score horizontally at 4 1/2, and I'm doing 2 at a time. This should be a total of 4. So I'm scoring at 4 1/2. This is going to be the base for card set B, so I'll file those away. Oh my goodness, I just realized that I did not trim these 7 by 10s in half. I'm so used to having a card that gets folded, but actually our A7 sized cards are just a single layer. So I'm going to go to my trimmer and then cut the 7 by 10s horizontally at 5 rather than scoring them. Okay, so now I have these little 5 by 6 pieces corresponding with step 5 of your trimming instructions, and they might sound a little bit weird, and I have kind of a funny tip for you as well, but they need to be scored 1/2 of an inch from one edge and then 3/4 of an inch from the remaining 3 edges. So it's difficult if you're a right-handed person to score at 1/2 inch. So what I'm going to have you do, if you are right-handed, is move it over to the right side of your score pal and score at 1/2 inch. Okay? Actually, I'm going to have you do this plain side up and score at 1/2 inch. Okay, so plain side up, score at 1/2 inch, then flip it back over, and now put it in horizontally and score at 11 1/4. Rotate one turn to the unscored long edge and score at 11 1/4. Rotate again to a short edge and score at 11 1/4. And so now I have this box. I have a U shape of all the same measurements and then 1/2 inch off the top. I hope that wasn't too unclear, so let's review just in case it was. In this case, the paper doesn't have a right or a wrong side, so we can start it by scoring at 11 1/2. Then flip the paper over and rotate, score at 11 1/4. Rotate, score at 11 1/4. Rotate, score at 11 1/4. Now, if you're a lefty, you can just score at 1/2 inch and then 3/4 of an inch. It just kind of depends on, you know, what your orientation is. Okay, I'm going to score at 11 1/2 with the plain side up. Flip, score at 11 1/4. Rotate, 11 1/4. Rotate, 11 1/4. And one last time with the orange. These all grew up to become the pockets for card set C, so I'll file those in that pocket. Next, I'm going to turn to the diagram for step 2 so I can get my scoring instructions for the papers that grow up to become the folios. We'll score horizontally at 1/2, so here I am scoring at 1/2 inch, so yes, it is a little bit awkward. And 3/4, so the score lines are really close to each other. Then 5 1/4, 5 3/4, 10 1/4, and 10 1/2. Then I'm just going to rotate this. Don't flip it, just rotate it. And I'll score at 6 and 6 1/4. All right, let's repeat that. Horizontally, we'll score at 1/2, 3/4, 5 1/4, 5 3/4, 10 1/4, and 10 1/2. Rotate, score vertically at 6 and 6 1/4. With that complete, I'll take out my cutting mat. I'll also need a craft knife and a ruler, and we'll be removing some areas here. So I'm going to flip this yellow paper over, it's a little bit easier to see, to the side that has the bumps of the score, because then it's just also easier to find what you want to trim. So the first thing I'll do is I'll have my paper positioned horizontally. I'm going to take my grid ruler and line it up with the innermost score line on the left edge. And that'll be about 3/4 of an inch from the left edge. Just make sure my ruler is nice and level. And I'm going to with my craft knife, cut from the top edge down to the the last score line that intersects. So I have my narrow scored area here, my wider here. That's kind of important. We're just cutting down to the second score line. So here's the first one, there's the second one. Okay, I'm going to flip this around now, and then I'm going to go from this edge to the same spot on the other side. So 3/4 of an inch. I'm trying to keep the paper position so I can always have my left hand pushing on the ruler and my right hand operating the craft blade in a comfortable position. So I made the same exact cut on both sides, removing both of these score lines. Now if I rotate this horizontally so the narrowest scored area is here, I'll place my ruler along the bottom edge here and remove that entire rectangular shape from each side. So I'm just cutting along the bottom score line to remove these rectangles. Next I'm going to take my folio paper and position it vertically so that the narrowest scored edge is on my right, so I can easily mark this measurement. And if you're a lefty, you would do the opposite. I'm going to measure 2.5 inches down from the top edge and make a mark. This is on the side with the bumps. And 2.5 inches from the other bottom edge here and make a mark. Then I'll use my craft knife to cut from the mark to this intersecting score line right here and right here. And then I'm also going to cut away that area. I just drew that in pencil so you can kind of see where I'm heading. So from the mark I made to this intersecting score line, I think I need to replace my blade. If that happens to you, that's why that's happening. Then I'm just going to move my piece a little bit so I can get a good comfortable position with my blade and remove this other angle. And then I'm going to make a cut just along this second score line here. And if you want, you can just grab scissors and cut along this remaining score line. I'm going to take this piece out. Whew. Wow, that was kind of intense. So here I have this little piece has been removed. And now everything we need to make our folio remains on the paper. And we repeat that with the black folio paper as well. And of course, if you feel more comfortable using scissors, you absolutely can do that with all of these lines. You would just draw the angles and then cut along the line that you drew. Not a big deal at all. I just think that the craft knife, if you're comfortable with it, makes a really nice, clean cut line. Well, as long as we have these papers out, why don't we go ahead and make our folios? Now, if you're asking yourself the question, Tricia, do I have to make these folios? Of course not. The papers that we started out with to make the folios start out as 8.5 by 11s. So the good news is, if you trim the papers and just cut them in half, to 5.5 by 8.5, you can get 4 additional cards out of the paper that I provided. Okay, so the first thing I did after emptying pocket D is I'm taking the smaller strip of 3/4 by 12 inch paper and using glue to nest it or center it onto the 1 by 12 in the contrasting color. So if you want, you can do that. It'll be white on yellow and then light yellow on white. And again, just using that bookbinding glue. We're doing that first because now it will give it ample time to dry while we finish making our folio. So here we have the folio paper, and basically what you want to do to start things out is fold on all of the score lines. Now you can see that all I need to do is bring up this bottom section, apply glue to the tabs, and stick the tabs down to the front and back covers. Make sure that your corners are really nice and square before you let that glue dry. That's why I like using a wet glue for this project rather than like my ATG tape. It just gives me a little bit more time to shape everything the way I want it to be. And also, if you want a little help burnishing, just insert your ruler or your bone folder down into the pocket and then use that to burnish the tab. Repeat that for the other side. This is already a really nice looking folio, but a nice finishing touch that you can add to this is if you happen to have a corner chomper or a corner rounder, you can always round the corners. I think I used the 1/4 inch setting. I just checked that, so we can always go back and do a 1/2 inch if we want. And all I did was round the outside corner of this folio, and I think that really gives it a nice look, doesn't it? Of course, then you'll want to do the same thing with the mats as well. So on the yellow folio, I used a black mat and then this printed mat. So I'll only round the upper right corner of each of these, and then center. You might want to add just like a little extra adhesive because it is going to be on the outside of something that gets handled a little bit more. And center that right onto the front of the folio, followed by the print. You can also add this cute little decorative cut apart to the folio if you like. That's entirely optional. I just kind of centered it in the upper area because the belly band would go around the middle. And you can choose either of the bands. Now, the best way to attach the band is to have this fully loaded with cards, just to give you some stability. But let me just quick show you the best way to do that, even though I don't have my cards in here. So you'll put this strip, this nested strip, and have the center of the strip, or the end of the strip at the center of the folio. Then go ahead and make some creases, some just preliminary creases. They don't have to be real, you know, crisp at all. In fact, they shouldn't be. And I'm just wrapping this loosely around. Now, if you wrap too tight, you won't be able to get this back on and off the folio, and that's not ideal. So I've just made some preliminary creases, and then I'll remove it and then actually make a sharp fold at every crease that you made originally. And you'll get the idea of where that is. Just kind of square it up nicely and make those final creases now where you made your soft crease, let's call it. Okay, so then this is really easy. I love this. Remember how we started? And we had our piece in the center. That's where we want this to end up. So then I'll open that edge and I'll add a little adhesive to this long end, and then a little bit to this end on the plain side, and then close it up. We'll cover up the seam with an embellishment. That'll look really nice. Let me show you. So here's our completed folios. For the black one, I have the yellow and white nested. That's my seam, which I covered with one of the black tags, and I just took a white gel pen and went around the perimeter with a dotted line. Next, I added the silver charm just by tying it onto the yellow and white striped twine. How easy is that? And I glued it into place so it's nice and sturdy. On this one too, I also had some extra scraps, like these, I think it was 1 by 8.5 piece. So I just trimmed that to fit the width to add a little bit of contrast to my outside front cover. On this one, I used one of the daisies that we put into the pocket. So all you need to do is use scissors to fussy cut that and add it to cover the seam of the belly band. Okay, let's get to making our cards. This is everything I just dumped out of pocket A, and wow, there's a lot going on here with these 8 cards, but you know, not really that bad considering everything's been trimmed and it's ready to go. So I've got my long and my vertical and my horizontal cards. So always as a reminder, the bump of the score will go on the inside of the fold, and you can go ahead and fold all of your cards in half. I want to share a quick little time-saving trick for you when you are folding your card bases in half. You can use your score pal to assist you by placing the card base just snug into the corner. When you bring the other half of the card up, it helps you really line up those corners beautifully and gives you a nice accurate fold. And then another time-saving tip would be to stack up several cards at a time, burnish them all at once. The first card we'll start out with is the tall card, but we're having it positioned horizontally, and then we can find the printed panel and an orange panel for this, as well as a light or a dark yellow and a light yellow border strip. And then we have these really tiny, here we have an orange and then a printed rectangle, and there should be a small cut apart that says hello and hello sunshine. There should be 2 of those the same. Now what I did here is took some of this really beautiful daisy edged ribbon and found the exact length it needed to be and trimmed it to that length. Another thing you can do is take this panel and run it through your embossing machine to give it a little bit of texture. This time I used this really sweet polka dot die from the Paper Studio, but if you don't have a texture die, it's really not that big of a deal. It just adds a little bit of flavor to the mix. And with that embossed, I'm going to go ahead and adhere this to my card base, followed by this strip. Actually, I think I'm going to switch this around and I put the more contrasting strip on the orange base. To prepare this ribbon, what I'll have you do is take your bookbinding glue and run a very thin bead line on each edge of the seam where the daisies meet. Okay, then just carefully flip it back over. If you want, you can just let a little bit of glue get onto your hands, not a big deal. And lay it in place on that strip and just give it a second or two to bond with the paper. It doesn't take long. Next, I'll nest the Hello Sunshine onto this little rectangle here, in this case the print. And I'm not sure if you've ever used our foam adhesive circles before, but I love these because it's so easy to get the backing off, and I make them go a long way by just cutting them in half, making sure I have a tab ready on each half. Before I attach these, I'm going to grab one of these darling laser cuts and sort of plan the positioning here for my piece, and I'll just attach this with some of our bookbinding glue as well. Then just remove the backing from your half circles. Isn't that nice? And lay that in to finish. On the inside, we'll use your really something special, happy birthday, and that will finish up this card. And here are my two finished samples. I used a little bit of a different texture die here, but the polka dot one is just as cute, just to show you that you can use really whatever you have on hand. Just a couple of tips for this next card. We're going to begin with our dark yellow card bases and then add the light yellow strips that you'll find in your pocket. Now this is entirely optional, but I want to tell you what I did. I took the little 1 by 8.5 inch scrap that was a result of cutting our folio in step 2. And I cut it vertically in half so that it was a 1/2 inch strip, and I cut that strip in half to make a 4 1/4 by 1/2 inch strip, and that's what I nested on top of these pieces to add a little bit of contrast to my stabilizing or my anchor band. Now that's completely up to you, but I just wanted to tell you what I did. For each card, then we have either a larger white rectangle nested with a print, nested with A Day Without Sunshine, or we have a larger print with a black nesting panel, and then A Day Without Sunshine is. Now, for the bottom half, or just underneath, you'll notice that the there's this laser cut here. So all I did, and you can use a trimmer for this or scissors, whatever you like, and just cut this in half. That way we get double mileage out of the embellishment. So that will be placed right under this card. And on the inside, the rest of the sentiment that reads on the front, A Day Without Sunshine is, you know, night. That's really all there is to it to make this pair of cards. Now the next pair of cards are the two cards that fold in half horizontally like so, and we'll use the 2 white strips. So on my original sample I did use a black strip, but I'd already cut it in half when I explained it to you, so don't worry about it, just use the white one, not a big deal. And then we have some nesting panels, and you can insert the strip wherever you want. You can have it right on the base of the card first. So you have a large black rectangle, an orange, and then You Are Brave. Then we have an orange rectangle, a white one, and You Are Brave. This will be on the outside, and then Thinking of You, you can add to the inside. Let's take a look at those finished samples. Here's what the card looks like. So when I tied this yellow and white twine around this to finish it off, I just tied the twine onto the cut apart itself. Then once I made a knot, I threaded the sun charm onto the tails and then finished with a bow. Very, very simple. And how appropriate is this card right now for just about anybody? I'm thinking of sending this to my friend who's a nurse. Would be a great card to receive, don't you think? And then on page 3 of your instructions, I forgot about these first 2 cards. So we have 2 left to go in set A, and then all 8 cards from this collection are done and ready to go into our folios. I love it. Okay, so we have our other pair of light yellow that opens sideways, and then we have a black panel to which you can add texture with an embossing folder, same with the white panel. And we'll add the orange with You Are Beautiful, and then the print with You Are Beautiful, And then just simply take the half daisy, fussy cut that, and add it to the card, and thank you for your kindness goes in the inside. These cards are intentionally pretty simple to assemble, but they sure are beautiful. I absolutely love this texture folder too. Oh, you can see I just took a little scrap, added it to the sentiment on the inside, and you can do that anytime. Here I just added the plain white strip. Set B cards are super easy. We're going to start out, this came out of the pocket for card set B, and I used my little scoreboard trick to fold these in half and burnish them to make really nice crisp folds. We'll have the print and the black be our vertical cards, and then the white and the orange will be our horizontal. Then let's distribute some panels. You can take any of these and add texture as you wish. I did that on a few of these, but not the print. Didn't want it to get too busy. So layer the print onto the black card base, and then the orange onto the white, and the black onto the orange. And then next we can add our interchanging nestables. I love this. So now we have the yellow with white, and then another yellow-white combo, and then our white-yellow combos. And you can, of course, interchange these. If you like some other combination better, hey, go for it, of course. And then for our vertical expressions, may all your days be sunny side up, 2 of those, and it's a good day to be happy, 2 of those. Here's a happy birthday here, and because it's your birthday, here. How did I finish these cards? Couple of ideas. In your kit, there is a black tag, and if you happen to have a flower punch, like any flower punch, I had this cute daisy punch, and I remember when we took I had this scrap that we removed, and I just went ahead and I punched a bunch of, as many daisies as I could out of this scrap, and that's what landed on the center of this black tag. A little bit of that yellow taffeta ribbon and a sweet bow was attached before I layered this onto my panel and card base. Same for the other card, very, very similar. Then on this one, I just made a standalone bow with a saddle stitched ribbon and attached it to the bottom edge of the card. And I'm not sure if you can see those textured panels as well in the background. It's just always a nice addition. I've taken everything out of pocket C, and there just doesn't seem to be as much there. I think it was all used in A, but this is so nice and easy to finish. We're going to start out with our card bases, and we'll make 2 orange and then 2 with a pattern. And on this one, a little step that I did to get things going is I used my punch, which was out already anyway, and I punched only the top 2 corners of each card base with my corner chomper on the 1/2" setting. Then we can distribute the rest of the pieces. So on the orange card bases, of course, I used the printed pocket paper. Then we have the orange pocket paper. And then we have to alternate our tags and our layers. I love this. So how about a light yellow mixed with a dark yellow here? And the same here, a light yellow larger panel with a dark yellow. And then we're going to do a dark yellow with a black on each one of these. Then we have our pocket full of sunshine. Ooh. And then keep your face always toward the sunshine, and shadows will fall behind you. There are no innies for the card, so the innie sentiment, or the innard, whatever you want to call it, is on the bottom portion. That will be hidden when this is inside the pocket. And of course we have some optional embellishing options here as well, but let's just get to the basics of the card structure. I'm going to stack and set aside these 3 and show you on this one exactly how this all came together. The first thing you do is look for that area where you have the single score line that's only a 1/2 inch from the edge, and I want you to fold down on that edge. And then if you happen to have an envelope punch board, this isn't required, but it's kind of cool. Just place this folded edge into the board, make sure it's at 3 inches, and punch through both layers. And that gives you a cute little thumb hole. Just kind of makes it look even more like a pocket. And then with some bookbinding glue, just go on in there and glue that flap into place. Now, did we need to have this little folded over flap? Absolutely not. But I just thought, especially because 2 of these pockets are printed paper, that folded over piece just gives it a nice finishing touch. Don't you agree? I hope you agree. And then I'm going to miter the corners. So on the opposite corners, I'm going to trim at an angle toward the intersecting score lines to remove each corner and create 3 tabs. When you work with tabs like this, you always want the side tabs to be folded in first so that they don't interfere with the insertion of the item going into the pocket. In other words, if this is folded in first, every time you slide something into that pocket, it's going to hit the top edge of that tab. But if they're like this, it's less likely to happen. And so I'll just tack down this lower flap a little bit with some glue and then put the glue on the rest. Now, could you use a dry adhesive here? Absolutely. Why don't I? Well, it goes back to what I'd said before. I prefer to have some adjustment time, and dry adhesive just doesn't allow for that. Like, what if I put this on here crooked and I want to adjust it? I can't if it's dry adhesive. It's one and done. So if you're really, really super confident that you're going to nail it the first time, absolutely use a dry adhesive. If you'd like to have a little bit of time to adjust things, there you go. That's what you want. All right, now our tag. So you have two choices. You can use a craft knife or you can use scissors. So if I were to use scissors, I would really just try to get this to match. The reveal here matches there. If you feel confident in your abilities. I love the accuracy of doing it with the grid ruler. And then you want to nest this onto the, in this case, the dark yellow panel. And before you nest onto the light yellow panel, you need to repeat the little trim. If you wait, you won't be able to have those layers. Then nest onto the light yellow panel and trim again. If you happen to have a, I think this is a crocodile, it's escaping me. Yes, a crocodile. You can use that to punch through all three layers quite easily of your piece. And then you can go ahead and trim a piece of saddle stitched ribbon. Make sure it's long enough. And then you can thread that on through, bring the ends through the loop. This is a pretty heavy duty firm grosgrain ribbon, so you have to kind of work with it a little bit as you're putting this in, but it really does look nice. And you know, a person who received this may just decide they want to keep it and use it later as a bookmark in their favorite book that they're reading with all their spare time that they may or may not have right now. Okay, then this can slide easily into the pocket, and now you have a pocket full of sunshine. You can go ahead and embellish these pockets with any remaining embellishments that you have, punched flowers, laser cut flowers, more ribbon. I even ran some of this extra ribbon through over one of the pocket edges on a sample, which let me show you that. So here are the finished cards. Here's one just like the one we just did, where I repeated that whole embellishment with the tag and the charm and the twine like I showed you earlier on the folio. Same idea here. So I just used different embellishments. This one is topped with the taffeta ribbon, and I used 1/2 of one of these laser cut flowers just under the lip of the pocket. This one, I didn't cut the thumb hole in the pocket. I just added that beautiful piece of ribbon across the edge, a hand cut daisy, and then 2 more daisy punches that I took out of this piece here. On the last piece, I used a whole daisy die cut, the other half from this one, and more taffeta ribbon to complete this card. Wow, we just made 16 cards and 2 folios out of just a dozen sheets of paper. Isn't that amazing? And I always want to challenge you, take these instructions that I worked so hard putting together and go to your stash, grab some more papers, perhaps a dozen sheets, and substitute your paper with our paper and go ahead and make another set of cards and another really nice folio. There's never been a better time to spread some sunshine. I hope you enjoyed this workshop, and if you liked this collection, please join me for the Hello Sunshine Page Kit workshop. I'd love to see you there, but if not, I'll see you right back here next month. Have a good one.